Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick, and we continue tonight with our Expectations series. Tonight, we're going to look at two players critical to the Ravens' 2025 season, Nnamdi Madubuike and Jordan Stout. Joining me to do that is Jake Vogel. Jake, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Ken. How about yourself?
I can't complain. Orioles finally won a ball game after 8 straight losses, which is kind of nice. And incredibly, we're not talking about a Georgia player here, which you always seem to try and with what you do, but this is good. Why don't we start with Jordan Stout? He's kind of the undercard to this pairing, entering his 4th season as the Ravens punter. Had middle of the pack, I will call it, punting results. The Ravens finished 13th in punting DVOA at 1.5, so a plus season. But they really recovered from last year when they allowed a lot of yardage per return, 14.8, and they're down to 8.0 in 2024. So they cut out a lot of the big returns.
Yeah, I thought that was a good part of the game for Jordan and the coverage unit for sure. Definitely think that there's room for improvement for him, and we'll get to that for what a good season and a great season will be. But I think after the whole Justin Tucker thing and his departure from Baltimore, some of the smoke is clearing, in my opinion, and perhaps a pretty clear picture is being made that Stout wasn't a big piece of the reason that Tucker had kind of declined over the past 2 seasons. And if that is the case, and we can't really point to the holder being a negative, I think that's a really good thing looking forward. So, yeah.
Yeah, it obviously would be a big part of his 4th season is determining, how he can synergize with Tyler Loop. And Tucker's decline exactly coincided with Stout's arrival, which is kind of unfortunate. However, they spent an awful lot of time training him, both Sam Cook, who's no longer part of the Ravens coaching staff as of recently, and Randy Brown, who, of course, the kicking ace for the Ravens in terms of coaches. But let's talk about Stout a little bit as a punter first, and then we'll get back to him as a holder. He improved in some ways that are maybe a little bit hidden from most people, but were significant. The number of returned punts was down significantly this year, and the hang time on average on his punts was up significantly by about 1/6 of a second, from 4.42 seconds, up from 4.25 seconds in 2023. I know it doesn't sound like much. That's a lot for a punter in terms of additional time in the air.
For sure. I think that definitely contributed to the coverage unit being able to get down there and forcing a fair catch. And then also, Stout had a number of kicks out of bounds, which isn't great. But sometimes the directional punting game is really just trying to pin somebody into the corner, and a lot of those balls can end up going out of bounds. And in Stout's case, they might have gone out of bounds a little bit early on him.
Did they still use the term coffin corner when you were a kid?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm not that old, or maybe I am that old, but it was used for a lot of my youth is the term I recall. Anyway, 24 of his 59 punts were inside the 20, which was in the top half of the league. Now, we still haven't seen him deliver on the touchback and in 20 numbers that he had in college. Very low touchbacks, tremendous number of, as actually an in 10 punts that he had while he was in college. Just ridiculous numbers for those. But he's improved a little bit this last year. The 7 touchbacks he had were still tied for 7th most in the league, but that's on a small scale. The median was 5. He had 7. He did have kind of a low number of punts relative to some other players in the league at 59. So you would hope that he wouldn't have as many touchbacks as the median, frankly, given that. And he tied for the 12th most out of bounds punts, as you alluded to. And I think in today's game, it's not the way punts are covered. It's usually kick it high, kick it deep, maybe kick it directionally, but keep the ball in bounds and let your coverage team get down there and tap it around to the 1 yard line if they can.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I think out of bounds is fine, but it's a matter of getting the ball, inside the 20, deep inside the 20, and then letting it kind of roll out at the one, which is like the perfect punt. Um, that's a lot easier said than done. Oh, Ken, you're muted.
The way I look at it is if you keep the ball in bounds, your coverage team is then in control of how that
Hmm.
kick works out, particularly if it's too high to be returned, or if it's too deep to be returned. The old John Madden thing: you don't try and field a punt if you're inside the 8-yard line. So they will not try and return a punt from back there. They'll deke. The return man will do all kinds of things to try and trick the gunners. But if you keep it in bounds, they have a chance to pick up those extra yards that can be very valuable. If you kick it out of bounds, a lot of bad things can happen. You can still kick the ball in the end zone. You can shank it and come up way short.
Hmm.
Obviously, you can kick the ball in the end zone if you let it roll as well. But
Sure.
there is advantage there. So the other thing I think it's important to note for both kicker and holder, and we're probably going to, it obviously doesn't matter for Justin Tucker anymore since he's gone, but it matters for Tyler Loop, is that the weather environment here in Baltimore is one of the worst in the entire NFL. Most of the places that have worse weather have covered stadiums. Not all of them, but most of them. And this is a environment. Cleveland is also quite bad in the AFC North, where weather really has a negative impact on punting and kicking. And the Ravens, by DVOA terms, played in the 6th worst weather of any NFL team.
Yeah. That the context really matters with that. Kind of at the end of the season, we don't necessarily look at the context initially. I think you're looking at all of the factors first, kind of the raw stats, and then obviously the DVOA and the more analytical look at the position. But certainly the weather has been a factor in Baltimore and in the AFC North. I mean, when you're talking about Cleveland, heck, Cincinnati. I mean, Evan McPherson was once considered the next big up and coming kicker, and then he had some struggles there in Cincinnati. Same thing in Cleveland and Pittsburgh. Honestly, they've been really fortunate with their kicker for a while now.
Possible.
But
Yep.
yep. Uh, but yeah, I mean, we normally think of it affecting the kicking game, the field goal unit, kickoffs and stuff, but not as much the punting game. But certainly, it would have the same kind of impact with that.
All right, let's talk about what we have regularly said is the most important job of the Ravens holder, of the Ravens punter, which is to be the holder for Justin Tucker. And Cook did that job very well for a lot of years. In 22, when Stout arrived, Tucker was coming off a season where I think he was plus 21 or thereabouts. He might have been in the teens, but in terms of field goals plus extra points on those plays above expectation. FTN keeps that, the former Football Outsiders site, and he was still at plus 8.8 in 22 in Stout's first year. He then dropped to plus 3.1 in 23, which was 13th in the league. He was second with that 8.8 in Stout's first year. And then he dropped to minus 5.1 this last year, which was 27th in the league. So if you, assuming you can't pin this on Stout, which is, I believe, the case that everyone involved is making. Randy Brown, I believe, is saying that. John Harbaugh has never said anything but that. Justin Tucker has never said anything but that. It's on me. I'm the one who's not getting the job done, kind of thing. And I think there is something about him trying to maintain leg strength and not being able to kick as accurately with it somehow as he aged. And that's just obviously a tough part here of getting old. And I think it would be conjecture only to say that his off the field troubles were somehow affecting him on the field. I don't think that's likely to be true, because obviously this could have been hanging over his head for years, and he was a great kicker for many years in there. So I don't think it's that. I think we have pretty clearly got the indication that Moore and Stout are fine. and it should work out for Tyler Loop. They have hopefully an above average Wolfpack 2/3 working with him.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Definitely looking forward to what those three guys can do together. And with the bar being as low as it was in 2024, I think the expectations going into 2025, even with a brand new kicker that's, hasn't kicked a single ball in the NFL regular season or preseason, um, that bar can be set higher, in my opinion, than what we saw from 2024, Justin Tucker and that Wolfpack.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. But let's since you brought it up, let's jump right in and talk about what is a good season and what's a great season. Start with a good season for us. What does that look like for Jordan Stout?
As far as just being a punter, yards per punt, they don't necessarily matter to me. It's more the net yards, but if you want to put a number on it, he's kind of hovered around 46 yards per punt, was as high as 47.8 in 2023. So I think 46 and up is all right. And then the net yards, I'd like it to be greater than 41 for a good season. The main thing that I'd like to see him improve on is getting those punts inside the 20, increasing that percentage. 44 plus percent of his punts inside the 20 would be a good season. And the touchback number, you basically want your punts inside the 20 and then your remaining punts to be a large portion of all of his punts. The touchbacks and inside the 20, anything that's, not even a touchback is not good. So that number can just kind of fluctuate, but I put it, a little bit around that 10% number. But here's the next part with the holding field goal percentage. Barring a pretty good year by Loop, I'd like to see about 85% field goals made, if not higher. Really strong holds, not being a reason for misses during the season. Always getting those laces out. I'd like to see a PAT percentage of 96 or higher. It's easy to have a season making 100% of your PATs, but in Tucker's last 3 years, the numbers were 96.9, 98.1, and 96.8% on those.
So he missed about 5 in total there, didn't he? In those last 3 years.
Over the years, yeah. But he only missed, I think, 1 in 2022, or maybe 2 of them. Let's see. He missed 1 in 2023, and then he missed, I think, 2 last year. So yeah, something like you said. Field goals from 40 yards and up all the way to 49. I'd like to see 84% of those made at least, and then the 50 plus yarders, 65% at least. Those are kind of my bars for a good season. And it's difficult when you're talking about the holder and we're not doing the show on Tyler Loop. But, if we can kind of get those numbers out of the Wolfpack, I think it'd be a good starting point. Other than that, I think him continuing to improve as a punter, getting the special teams unit, in a higher ranking as far as DVOA goes, making the coverage unit even better by putting a ton of air under the ball, not really sacrificing too much on distance, but certainly giving them the time to get down the field. And just being a good teammate to Tyler Loop.
All right. I think you've got some good stuff in there. I would state it a little differently, I think. For him, for Loop, in terms of what Stout needs to deliver is very closely tied to Loop's performance, but I'd say Loop delivers a plus season in terms of points relative to expectation. That's field goals and extra points, and that's without an adjustment for weather. So I do expect they'll be kicking under tough conditions. I want to see him have a good year relative to that. I want him to develop some directional trickery as a punter in the way we saw Cook do. I want to see an in 20 to touchback ratio. That's really one of the key things I look for. That in 20 number needs to be significantly higher than the number of touchbacks, meaning he's gambling well on the additional yardage he attempts to kick it closer to the goal line. And his net punting average, I'd like to improve at least slightly. Those are the only conditions I'd put on it. It's a fairly significant set because I'm asking him basically to be in the top half of the league in a bunch of these categories. But I don't think it's unreasonable. I think they've got a good kicker in place. I think they've got a good system in place, and certainly a very good coach in place to improve the kicking and have a kicker who's good relative to the league, even as a rookie. How about a great season?
For sure. I would agree with all that. A great season. It's similar to a good season and everything I listed before, better numbers. So yards per punt, just a little bit greater, maybe like 47 to 48 yards per punt. Net yards per punt, let's see, 42 to 43 yards. Inside the 20%, I would like him to be a top 5 to top 10 punter in terms of that percentile. Touchback percentage, same thing as I mentioned before.
Let me hold you up for a second here. You said top 5 to top 10 punter. You mean top 5 to top 10 out of 32, right? Not top 5 to top 10 percentile rank of the league, right? Because that would be like asking me the second best or third best punter in the whole league, right?
Right. I just mean I want him to be, between punter 5 and punter 10.
Gotcha.
In the league, in that level. Yeah, touchback percentage, same thing as I mentioned before. Field goal percentage for Tyler Loop, if it can improve past that. I mean, so when I was looking at this, I was really kind of getting all of Justin Tucker's numbers from the 3 years with Jordan Stout. His field goal percentage was 86% in 2022, 86.5 in 2023, and then it dropped all the way to 73.3% in 2024. So I think if he's in that 86, 2022 was not really a bad kicking year for Tucker, and he had an 86 percentile field goal percentage. So 86 and up is probably a great season. If he can, get to 88 or something, that'd be phenomenal. But really, as far as Jordan Stout goes, it's just about, holding the ball well and getting the whole unit to operate as smoothly as possible. And whether that's taking another step in some sort of special teams leadership, I don't know, but I think a great season would be Stout showing the Ravens he has enough value to keep him around on another contract. Hopefully, for our case as fans of the team and analysts, it's not an overly expensive deal, but if he was, in that top 5 punter range or even top 10, he's probably not getting Pro Bowl nominations necessarily, but if he's kind of flirting with that, I think that'd be a great season for Stout.
All right, I'll be real brief with this. You hit on a lot of different factors in there. I'd say a great season for Stout is Loop delivering 5+ points above expectation on the combination of field goals and extra points. His punting improving to the top quartile of the league by most important metrics. And when I say that, I want to see him have a punting DVOA that's in the top quartile, an in 20 ratio that's in the top quartile, that in 20 to touchback ratio be good, and starting opposition field position. One of the problems with judging punters when the Ravens, the punt for the Ravens is that the Ravens often will end up giving the punter better field position to punt from, which will eat into the length of his punts. Okay. So you don't want to, if you're punting from the 45-yard line, you're obviously truncating some of the good results that a punter can get in terms of yardage. So that's not it's not a ideal situation. He's also got the weather to deal with. But if he can be in the top quartile league, I think it'd be terrific. Punting DVOA improves the top 5. I already said that. Consolidates hang time improvement from 2024 with continued improvement in opposition returns. So I'd like to see a drop even from 8.0, which is not a bad number, but it was so disastrous in 23. They really needed improvement there and expected it. They can go lower still. He doesn't have to be in the Pro Bowl discussion at all. But the Ravens try and re-sign him. I think that's part of a great season. If the Ravens have no interest in re-signing him, then I think that probably does not reflect well on the season that he had. So I don't see how it could really be a great season. Anyway, that's where I am on Tyler Luke. I'm sorry, on Jordan Stout.
Yes.
Very intertwined people there. Let's move on. Talk about Nnamdi Madubuike a little bit. He cashed in on his contract year in 2023 with a big sack year. He's now with the Ravens as the contract is currently structured. I believe it's already been, simple restructured once.
Yeah.
Okay. So now he's guaranteed to really be with the team at least through 26, which will be the third of the 4 years of his contract. There's a $10.5 million savings still there for 27. By the time the Ravens we're at this point doing this show next year, a very good chance the Ravens have already made it almost impossible to cut him during the term of the contract. If he has another year like he has, if they do another simple restructure, we might be at that point.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think he had a bad 2024. However, when you're, looking at him in comparison to his previous self in 2023, you knew that a number of those metrics and numbers were going to go down. His win rate, as more so like finishing with sacks, was just, it was too high of a number to keep that up. I think a lot of the fan base is kind of down on him, partly for a good reason and partly not. I think he can be much more productive, even with a similar kind of season that he had last year when you consider the personnel that the Ravens have added in through the draft this year. So I am optimistic that he's going to bounce back in a little bit of a way and that he can still progress as well. But, he hasn't lived up to his contract yet that he signed, whereas Lamar Jackson, a big contrast between the two players, but Lamar Jackson immediately when he signed his contract won an MVP and then
won another, let's be honest.
Last year he played even better than I think we've pretty much seen any player play before for a season. And basically won MVP again, another first team All-Pro, put it that way. So Lamar has been fantastic. He's, outperforming his contract, which is ridiculous considering it's a $52 million deal. But Madubuike has definitely a lot of room to grow upward to kind of fulfill his potential and kind of make some positive movement going forward.
Okay, I mean, you spoke to the drop off in 23 to 24. From 23 to 24. I don't think it was that severe. He had 9 sacks if you include the playoffs, 2.5 sacks in the playoffs. And boy, I mean, if you've got any problem with him, well, that doesn't count. That's the playoffs. I mean, that's all we hear about every other player is they don't show up in the playoffs. Go take a breath before you make that argument about Nnamdi Madubuike getting his sacks outside of the regular season schedule. He had 45 more snaps played than in 23, which is remarkable because he went up to 66% of snaps played in 23 and then up to 72% in 24. I didn't think either of those changes were necessarily healthy for him, but he's certainly held up to the workload. I thought he did actually play better when he had fewer snaps. And he also, when he was worked his hardest, which was in the middle of the year when Pierce was hurt, and they had other guys hurt in the Tampa Bay game. They're down to 2 guys at one point who were healthy. That was when he had his worst little stretch of play. So I think he probably could do well to take a few less snaps, and maybe Aeneas Peebles is going to put him in a place to take a few 3-tech snaps off.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's definitely part of my good season and great season for him.
All right. He's used primarily as a pass defender this last year, 68% of his snaps coming on pass plays. Now, you and I did the defense interior, and then we did the draft show together, of course. It's very rare that you get as high as 59 or 60% of the snaps played in pass defense for a college player. Very rare. And only the really extreme pass rushers for the interior do it. Madubuike is very unusual, even in the pro game, even when there's more passing involved, to be doing it that much. And part of it is the Ravens' offense is so good that they force other teams to pass, and the Ravens' run defense is outstanding. So they
If you're looking for a better way to unwind, focus, or even get a good night's sleep, listen up. Let me tell you about Mood, the online cannabis company that's changing the game when it comes to functional gummies. They've crafted a whole line of federally legal THC blends designed to help with everything from stress to sleep to mental clarity and even some spicier needs if you're into that. Now, what makes Mood different? They go beyond just THC. They pair it with herbs and adaptogens to create targeted effects that you won't find in any other dispensary. And every gummy is made with pesticide-free, small farm American cannabis, so you're getting quality that you can trust. I've tried their sleep gummies, and let me tell you, takes about 15 minutes, and I'm out cold, no grogginess, no weird side effects, getting some of the best sleep I've gotten in my life when I take one of these gummies. And if you need a mood boost, there are Epic Euphoria gummies, game changers. And right now, Mood is giving listeners 20% off their first order by using the promo code RAVENS at checkout. So head on over to mood.com, find the perfect gummy for whatever life throws your way, and don't forget to use the promo code RAVENS to save 20%.
Went back to a year where Orr didn't sacrifice run defense for pass defense the way that McDonald did in 23. I don't know if that's going to stick, by the way. Do you have a sense on that?
I agree. I feel like going into the season, especially before the Ardarius injury, we were much more likely to see dime defense, kind of like the Wink Martindale days. Even Dean Pease liked it a decent amount, but the Mike McDonald nickel defense, where you have 2 really good inside linebackers or one special one and another guy that was coming on strong, doesn't seem to be the case right now. So I do think we're going to see a lot more DBs playing frequently, and part of that has to do with the Ravens, getting the lead and putting teams into passing situations.
Yeah, I think that'll be a big factor for pass run ratio. Also, a big factor for turnovers. It's just you have the lead is a huge reason for it. I've told the story on this show a number of times about the actuarial student who came in and said he found that interceptions were more closely correlated to wins than fumbles were. And I'm kind of holding back a smirk, but I'm trying to get him then to explain it to me. And then he went on this long, meandering argument with himself, frankly, for about 15 minutes, trying to explain it. But oh yeah, well, there's a yardage return. I kind of challenged him, probed at him. Frankly, was kind of playing with him a little bit. Honestly, I probably shouldn't have done this. To ask him, wouldn't a fumble is recovered right at the line of scrimmage, or sometimes behind it? Wouldn't that typically give you a better field position situation? And of course, the reason is central is that when you're passing, you're trying to catch up, and that's when a lot of interceptions occur. So the winning team typically is the team that gets interceptions. So it is something Harbaugh himself has mentioned before, and it's good that he understands this relationship. I knew he would understand it. It's good that he's even willing to play it that way. Is saying, our offense needs to put us in a position to get more interceptions on defense by building leads. And he talked about, I think, the 2015 team, which was terrible and all injured and whatnot. They didn't get a lot of interceptions. I think that was the year. And obviously not having the lead had a lot to do with that. Yeah.
Yes, I remember there was a year, it could have been 15, where they really struggled to force turnovers, especially interceptions. And then the following season, they brought in Les Snead, I believe.
Mhm.
And he may have been the guy that introduced the tennis ball drill for the DBs in training camp and preseason. I just remember it vividly because, like, man, they're just kind of like throwing around tennis balls and trying to like figure out how to create more turnovers. And then that season, they were, kind of night and day difference from the year before. That a defense that was a lot better at creating turnovers, and and a lot of that, there's variance in defense year by year, so you can't pin it all on the coach coming in and some of the drills that they do. But focusing on it and doing that definitely leaves a mark and something that you remember, regardless of how much it actually impacted the team.
Yeah, it encourages soft hands, which is one of the things they like about using it. They use a big tennis gun, like you see on a court when you're practicing returning serve or something like that. But they set that up. One of the things about it is that it does become kind of a clown show when you have it. There's good things about it, but there's also this clown show risk. And recovering the fumbles that they sometimes do at the end of a training, one session. They'll go on a slip and slide. They'll do it, and the veterans get to use the hose on the rookies and making sure it's tough for them to recover the football. But the clown show it became was that a lot of the other players who were not defensive backs or not linebackers, who weren't really supposed to be part of the drill, you want to be involved in it. And so like Terrell Suggs is, like, I'm involved in this. I'm next in line here. Get out of here, you rookie, kind of thing. And, some of the players that might benefit from it a lot, are being clowned out of it by Suggs, being that way. And Terrell Suggs, great positive influence in general on the quality of practice for the Baltimore Ravens. So I don't want to, beat on him too badly for this, but I think, it does need to be controlled, and that you really want to learn something from the drill and not have it be this like game you're playing. That's kind of like, how can we make fun of people making an error in a certain way? Anyway.
The name, for whatever reason, I came up with the wrong one. It was Leslie Frazier. That was the DB coach that came in and helped us out. Yeah.
All right. Now this last year, one of the things about Madubuike that became even more extreme is he was paired with Travis Jones. Now they went to this pairing in the end of 23, and of course Madubuike's having his career year and whatnot. It really worked out. Now this last year, there were hardly any snaps where Jones is on the field where Madubuike wasn't. Now Jones had a higher snap count. Madubuike had a higher snap count than Jones, so the overlap goes in the direction you would expect. But almost every single snap that Jones is on the field, Madubuike was there as well. And it is a very good pairing for him. It gets him a one-on-one matchup. It really precludes easy. I mean, they have to really do gimmicky things like block the left defensive edge player with a tight end in order to get a double team on Madubuike when you've got Travis Jones in there. There was really no way to easily double team him. Now they might do that anyway or they might use two guys on him anyway if they put him on the outside. But they used a lot of different strategies this year as well to try and get Madubuike a better, more advantaged position to rush from, including moving him to the edge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you saw that for sure. Being a higher profile player on this defense and kind of comparing that to his position group in the league, you kind of think Chris Jones when you see Madubuike out on the edge, something that the Chiefs have liked to do with him a good bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have one red flag that needs to be pointed out with Madubuike's season last year. He had 4 roughing the passer flags among 6 total penalties. Also had a face mask on the year. There is no justification for a defensive player with 5 personal fouls in one season. There's no, and that's very, very costly. I mean, a bunch of 15-yard flags. One of them, it looks like it must have been offsetting because it showed up as 0 yards and not a first down. So the only way for that to be true is if he roughed the passer, but there was also, say, an offensive pass interference on the same play. or an illegal motion or something.
I recall one of those maybe in the Chiefs game.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It very well could have been. You're right. I think it was early on, maybe even in that Chiefs game. The other thing that was good about his season, so he's got to figure out how to deal with those penalties, is that his missed tackle rate improved dramatically. He was at only 6.1% this last year, missed only 3 tackles and had 30 stops, which is a fantastic number for an interior defender. And a 10-to-1 ratio. You and I, again, we did the IDL show. There were only a handful of guys above 10.0 in terms of that ratio among the top draftable IDLs playing in a lower context environment in college. Some of them playing not even in Power 5 schools, but most of them playing in Power 5 schools. That's a very, very high total to attain.
Oh, for sure. That's something that is going to be, important for him to continue. I imagine that number could kind of regress a little bit in 2025, but as far as his great season goes, I think keeping it right around there would be awesome.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk a little bit about his pass rush productivity and give you some stats as I see him. But the pass rush pyramid, I thought, normalized in terms of his finish rate relative to his aggregate pressures. His aggregate pressures are down a little bit. 78 pressures down to 60. Actually had more pass rush snaps by a few. So that was unfortunate that his pressure rate was off. Not completely unexpected, but unfortunate. But his finish rate dropped from 45% in 2023. So the 23 is really a perfect storm of a lot of pressures and a very high finish rate for him getting it done. Only 32% as a finish rate, which by the way is still pretty good for an interior defender, but is potentially sustainable. The 45% is no way in hell sustainable for a second year. His pass rush productivity per PFF was 6.3. That was still tied for 16th among the interior defensive line, among those with 300 plus pass rushes. There's only about 58 guys, by the way, who qualify for that group. So 16th out of 58 is still, 70th percentile roughly, which is good, but maybe not what we're expecting to pay $25 million a year for. I thought he really benefited, particularly in 23, from having outstanding pass rushers on the outside. But even in 24, I thought there was still benefit accruing. The Ravens kept their primary high leverage pass rushers in good shape, and Van Noy and Owe both had good sack years. Obviously both career years for both of them would be a more accurate way to put it. They each had the characteristic of each of their seasons was very high finish rates. And Madubuike and Travis Jones were both a part of that. I think Travis Jones more in terms of commanding the double teams that allowed them one-on-one to get their pressures, and Madubuike more in terms of morphing that pocket as a one-on-one pass rusher.
Yes, I would completely agree with that. You saw in 2023, guys like Jadeveon Clowney and Kyle Van Noy, and Odafe Owe and Travis Jones kind of all creating, pushing that pocket and allowing Madubuike to get some of those finishes. And just in 2024, it flipped a little bit. They were all, Clowney wasn't here, but everybody else was, and they were still doing their thing. But Madubuike wasn't the fortunate one in terms of cleaning up as often as he might have in 2023.
Yeah, I'm still, when I watch Madubuike, one of the things you see a guy who has unbelievable quickness in terms of pursuit. And, a guy he reminds me of is just being like, you're stymied by his relative quickness relative to his size, because he's compact and extremely muscular. This other guy I got to name was not compact in any way, shape, or form. He certainly had muscle, but Sam Adams, watching the 2000 season again, had unbelievable quickness for his size. Great first step, great closing speed. I can't even imagine being a quarterback and seeing him coming at the rate of pace, and I'm sure you'd be in awe of it. But if you thought you could get away from it, you were generally wrong. Is that he was just too quick for that. And Madubuike, I think, has a lot of that. Brings up some great stunt synergies with the other linemen. He could be an under or an over guy. They've typically more often probably used him for his quickness as the looper. They've used Jones some for that too, and they've used certainly Van Noy or Owe to go either one gap or two stunt and find a way to work over his action. But him being the underneath player usually puts him at a really big ability to power through that half man block and get to the quarterback. And that's, as I've said on this show many times, that's where the advantage often comes. Is you think it's the underneath players sacrificing himself to be blocked by two guys. Usually he's setting up a double half man block that has to be peeled off, and then he gets a great advantage in terms of what's left over.
Yeah, and I would say the other element of that is when he is that guy on the inside, in those edge rushers, the loopers on the outside start, getting towards the quarterback. Oftentimes you'll see that quarterback have to step up in the pocket, and who's right there?
Yep.
Justin Madubuike, with at least one arm loose and ready to, try to grab him and bring the quarterback down. So I think you did see a number of those kind of plays this past season and in 2023.
Yeah, definitely some great cleanup there. All right, well, let's get to it and talk about what's a good season from your perspective on Justin Madubuike.
So a good season, I think with all these shows, your health is key. So keeping him healthy, 17 games is ideal. I'd like to see his snap count go down a little bit just to keep him fresh. And I think Aeneas Peebles, if he grows with Chuck Smith and Madubuike, I think he could contribute and, lighten the load a little bit. So 65% of defensive snaps for Madubuike, bringing him down closer to that 2023 number. Mm-hmm. Cut down on penalties to 3 or less. That would be good. Some rushing I was just saying that, some of those rushing the passer flags can be very subjective, kind of BS in the moment in those games. You still can't have them regardless. And you really have to avoid the face mask. He can do that more so than he can avoid every rushing the passer penalty that is going to be thrown at him. And keep the missed tackle rate low. That number probably goes up a little bit just because it was so strong, but probably around like 8 tackles to 1 miss would be really good. Maybe 7.5 tackles to 1 miss. An improvement in some pass rush aspects as far as production, the win rate, and then also, being a steady force in the run game for him. I think that is an area that, even though his missed tackle rate was extremely low, I think if teams are going to bully him in any sort of way, it would be in the run game with some power. Madubuike is a strong guy, built like a brick house, but he doesn't have the anchor that Travis Jones or Michael Pierce would have in the run game. So I think if he can improve in that way without losing any of his athleticism, that'd be huge. And I think, like I alluded to earlier, him kind of stepping up in a leadership role, in a mentorship for Aeneas Peebles and some of those other young defensive linemen, that would be really critical and helpful for the whole unit. So seeing him take Peebles under his wing, teaching him a few tricks of the trade, and continuing what he's done the past couple of years and just kind of taking it up a notch from last year would be a good season in my mind.
Yeah, I go with that. That definitely is a.
Sorry, I had a couple things I forgot to mention. So these are more just Ravens defense as a whole numbers. Mm-hmm. Keep the Ravens defense in the top 7 of pass rush metrics, which include sacks, pressures, hits, while improving as a defense in the turnover production.
Okay.
A top 5 scoring defense. So points allowed, just, be there. That's great. Gotcha. And then a Pro Bowl caliber year, not all pro for this season, for a good season, but I think a kind of a Pro Bowl level. I think he was nominated to the Pro Bowl this past year.
Yep.
So yeah.
It doesn't seem outrageous that would be at the 60th percentile. Now I'm trying to think about in most players, would I say a Pro Bowl is an outrageous goal? But there's certain players where it just isn't. You Kyle Hamilton, you'd expect it. Roquan Smith, you probably expect it. So it's probably reasonable. I'll go through mine really quickly. Reduced flags, particularly those coincident with pass rushing, the roughing the passer penalties. Overall pressure rate improves slightly because it did take a notch down, but his finish rate remains similar. Now, I want to be clear. That should not mean that he's going to get more than 9 sacks or even 9 sacks, because his finish rate includes his quarterback hits as I ponder it, as I define it here. So getting quarterback hits is fine. He does take a chance. Every single quarterback hit he gets that's not a sack is a chance to get a roughing the passer penalty. So it's it's from those that you get those roughing the passers. I think his pressure pyramid will either normalize, or if you think of it's already normalized, then it'll stay normalized. The overall Ravens pass rush, I would expect to still be effective with a combination of improved edge rushers, scheme, and leads to protect. Doesn't even necessarily have to tremendously mean Madubuike is a guy that's driving that, but Madubuike does have to be one of the guys generating pressures that help other people finish. Mike Green, I think we are absolutely going to love him as a pass rusher in terms of what he can bring. I think some of it could be first pressure. I think some of it could be finishes. And it's just going to be so exciting to watch him play this year. And I'm as excited to see what his year looks like as I am to see how he impacts the rest of the players and how they improve their pass rush metrics and their turnovers, because he's in there creating havoc. So I'm really looking forward to that. What else do I have to say? You mentioned the points things. I won't go in there. The pass rush productivity climbs back to the top 10 to 12 among IDL. I think that's where he belongs, given the contract. 16th is not a far drop from that, so I'm not asking for a lot, I don't think. And his stops to missed tackle rate drops off slightly, but is still 7.5 to 1 plus. Now, you said missed tackle rate effectively. You said his tackles but you really meant stops to missed tackles, right? Okay, that's what I thought.
Yes,
okay.
Yeah, stops to missed tackles.
Okay, great. That's what I have for a good season. I didn't tag any postseason honors in there. I want to keep it as simple and largely qualitative goals. Great season. How about it?
Great season. Same thing. 17 games healthy. I really like that 65% defensive snaps. As far as sacks go, that's going to change year by year. I do think he can improve from what we saw this past year, especially when you're talking about just the regular season. I think, anywhere from 8 to, sky's the limit. 13 is crazy, but I'm not going to put a cap on him. I mean, whatever he can do for a great season's great. But yeah, 8 to 9 and up would be awesome. Penalties reduced by half or greater. Maintain a fantastic missed tackle to tackle rate, 8.5 to 10 tackles for every 1 miss.
I think you mean stops
return
again.
to higher production.
I think you mean stops per missed tackle, right? Yeah.
Yes, stops per missed. Yeah. Return to higher production level of 2023, while becoming a greater pressure player and big moment guy when it is needed. Run defense remains strong when Madubuike is on the field. No weaknesses versus power. Mentor young players like Peebles, teach moves to them in whatever way he can. I know we have Chuck Smith in the building. Ravens defense in the top 3 to 5 of sacks, quarterback hits, pressures, and turnover production, with a clear impact by Madubuike. Ravens defense in the top 3 of, top 3 scoring defense. Ravens return to playoffs, but make impact turnovers on defense that give Baltimore a positive turnover differential. Talking about the playoffs is, whatever, but just an idea for what the Ravens really need to do to take the next step and where I think their defense needs to improve. Not just a Pro Bowl caliber year, but a real chance for first team All Pro. And if not first team All Pro, then a shoe-in for second team All Pro. This would be a great season for Madubuike. And he starts to look like a value on his second contract.
All right. That's good. I definitely take that. That's a lot to pin on Madubuike, particularly saying that your defensive interior player has to be the driving force behind the additional turnovers that you get in the playoffs. That is the thing is letting you down. That's a lot to pin on him. He's a great player, and I hope he can do some of that. All right, here's a great season for me. Plays the entire season without a roughing the passer flag. There aren't that many roughing the passer flags per team, folks. We're talking 6 or 7 is a high number for a team, and it's your edge rushers typically who get them. And he's just got to play in more control. It means don't go for late quarterback hits. I love to see the quarterback on the ground too. I think it has real value in game terms to do it, but you can't be giving away roughing the passer flags. They're just too significant in terms of losing football games. I want him to hone his one-on-one pass rush skills yet further to create more pressure, even with the same or reduced sack total. I think it could well be a reduced sack total because his finish rate is very good for an interior defender. I want him to continue to draw the attention of offenses which don't have enough assets to block all of the Ravens' quality IDL without relying on one-on-one play. So if he, it doesn't mean much to draw the attention of the guard that you're the 3 tech, standing over or lining up against. You always have that guy's attention, but to the degree that the other team is thinking about how can we get a running back up there to help our guard against Madubuike, that's a good thing. If he's doing a lot of that. Ravens team sack total stays similar at 3.3 per game, and Madubuike threatens a double-digit sack year again, including the playoffs, by the way. Those sacks count too. He had played 19 games this last year. He got 9 sacks. That's a great total for an interior defender. If you could match that again, and I don't want 19 games now. I want 20 or 21. But if you could match that number again and that number of games, I'd be very happy. And I have no postseason honors as part of the discussion. Sure. Those will all come, by the way, if these things work out. So
yeah, right. Yeah, I agree. I didn't mean to put too much on Madubuike. I guess I was more so speaking on the entire defense. What does a great season look like? And I think those things happen if we have a great season from the defense, and Madubuike is contributing in the way that we've seen him contribute.
Yeah. I'm sorry to make light of it. It's just one of these things. There's a lot.
For sure.
Jake, it's always great talking football with you. Appreciate you coming on the air, making time on a Wednesday night here to do this. Tell folks where they can talk football with you online.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter or X at Real Jake Vogel, VOGEL. And I talk Ravens and Georgia football and anything NFL and college in between.
All right. Other folks out there, thanks so much for the recent support. We noticed the uptick in listens and what's going on. Really appreciate it. Anything you do to promote the show in terms of having other people introducing it to them would be obviously greatly appreciated. This expectation series is one of my favorite to do every year. So we're going to have a lot of fun with that over the next 2 months. But I also do want to hear from you if you've got a film study short idea, and I will figure out how to plug it into our schedule and make sure it gets aired. DM me. They're always open on Twitter. Jake, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Ken.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.